Okay, this really grinds my gears, and I'm not even the older sibling. Maybe it's because some of my closest friends are older siblings, and I'm just so super sympathetic. Or maybe it's because the most recent season of RWBY has stressed, for me at least, an already abundant hatred of Yang, specifically how Aang acts as Ruby's older sister. And let me be clear that while I usually try to leave bias out of analyzing characters, I refuse to do so with Yang at the moment because she's my favorite character, and I'm a petty bitch. These high expectations of older siblings don't start and end with Yang, though. Most anime will stress how older siblings need to be the protectors of their younger siblings, even if the effort is taxing on the individual. In sitcoms, it's a huge deal to meet the older siblings and gain their approval, because, and I'm not exaggerating, most older siblings are treated by society as secondary parental figures. In cartoons, older siblings are usually the same way, overly protective and willing to sacrifice anything for their younger siblings. This, or they're comically asshole-ish, but always willing to save the day when it comes down to it. I don't think this is as dangerous as most of the other tropes that bother me, but it does bother me enough that when I watched RWBY for the first time, Yang and Ruby's relationship was one of my favorite parts of the show, and it kind of bothered me that a lot of other people didn't think this way. You have to have my opinion. After years of shitty Wattpad stories with YN calling her asshole, jock brother, big bro, and the typical BS in media, it was refreshing for me to watch siblings who, while supportive of each other, had their own unique and, more importantly, complete personalities and stories. What I mean by this is that it's not uncommon for siblings to only exist as auxiliary characters in media. Either the character is known as the older sibling of a more important character, or the character is known as the younger sibling of a more important character. I guess this means that I'm pissed off at the overly childlike portrayal of younger siblings as well. They're essentially pure entities of innocence used to further the development of older siblings. But not for Ruby and Yang. I know Ruby's technically the main character, but the show makes it clear that Ruby has 4 protagonists, Yang being one as well. Yang doesn't exist solely in the plot to be Ruby's older sister, solely exists as her protector, solely interact with Ruby. And yet, a lot of fans act like this should be the case. They say Yang is failing in her sisterly duties. Since Ruby is the protagonist and they say Yang should be doing more for her, it feels like some fans are demoting Yang to this older sibling trope instead of letting her exist as her own complete character. People's main complaints are that Yang doesn't have as much conversation with Ruby anymore, or that she's too concerned with getting pussy to spend quality time with her sister. And don't worry, I'm going to factor in the first episode of Volume 8 later, but I have a few issues with this. 1. Relationships are a two-way street, baby cakes. If there isn't much conversation going on between Ruby and Yang, why is Yang the only one to blame? Ruby doesn't go out of the way to make conversation with her either. Oh, I'm sorry. I must have forgotten that Yang was born an ancient 2 years earlier, making her an older, wiser being who has so much more power and control over the relationship. Like, what are they now, 17 and 19? It's not going to be the same dynamic as, let's say, Weiss and Winter, who feel like the difference between a teenager and a full-grown adult. It's more like Raven and Crow, who, similarly to Yang and Ruby, were on the same team and grew up at a much closer age. And okay, Raven and Crow are much closer in age, but you get the point. So what makes the 2 years that Yang has over Ruby so super fucking detrimental in how they act as characters? Like, I get it. At a young age, this time can make a difference. But this isn't a weird age gap in a relationship. This is just a matter of bonding. 2. Yang cares about Ruby a very normal amount, and that's a good thing. I think sibling relationships have been romanticized in media, and not in the Alabama way. Rather, I think media has painted an overly loving, overprotective, over-involved older sibling as some golden standard for people. I think this pulls us away from the reality that characters like Yang shouldn't have to give literally every ounce of effort into being Ruby's older sister in order to be a good sibling. We had the haha moment where Yang met up with her friends and ditched Ruby, rip those random blank figures by the way, but when the first night rolled around, Yang was there to comfort her sister. Yang suggested that Ruby be more open to joining teams with other people, but was just as eager to find her sister in the forest. What this tells us is that Yang, while she cares for Ruby and enjoys being with her, still brings reality into the picture. The sisters' personalities match up well, and you can easily tell that they were raised in the same household. I enjoy when shows demonstrate the effect of family and household on the individual. Even Avatar, A World of Fantasy, has a very realistic sibling portrayal. With Zuko and Azula, their parents' different ways of raising the two of them gave birth to their very different personalities. But even Zuko seemed saddened for a moment upon thinking Azula died, and just as saddened when she lost. Yang and Ruby's father, however, never played favorites, so it makes sense that while they have their own unique personalities, there is a decent amount of overlap in behavior, especially in season 1 before the hashtag trauma. You can tell that Yang and RWBY were the goofballs while Blake was the quiet one and Weiss was the prissy rich girl. Obviously, they came to Beacon as teenagers, so it isn't shocking that their personalities are slowly building as their own, rather than running parallel to each other. So as they grow, it's only natural that they don't rely on each other so much, and people assume that this lack of dependence is indicative of Ying's failing as an older sister. But this couldn't be further from the truth. With a small age separation like theirs, the fact RWBY sees Yang as a friend instead of some separate entity of family is a good thing, because to RWBY, friends and family are one and the same. RWBY can talk to Yang and depend on her, but the show never paints this as Yang's only purpose. The hot tea is that Yang is written as a character over a sibling, and that scares people because they're afraid to think of older siblings as people over caretakers. To be honest, if my brother and I were on a battlefield, and he knew his cat GF was in immediate danger, but he didn't really know where I was, I'd expect him to prioritize his cat GF, as one should. Yang isn't saying that she cares more about Blake than RWBY, but she's someone who weighs her options in the moment, considers where she'd be the greatest asset, and go for it. You know, like what's happening now in season 8. In season 5, Yang made it clear that she'll always want to make sure RWBY is safe. She chose RWBY first. However, in season 8, Yang knows that RWBY is safe, and as anyone can be in a time like this, she's choosing to apply her skills where she feels they are most valuable. RWBY, on the other hand, chooses the good of the world first. In season 3, she left Yang in a vulnerable state in order to make the journey with Team Ranger, because that's where she felt most needed for the world. And yet, no one is faulting RWBY for her personal philosophy, so why Yang? Because, you guessed it, she's the older one. Yang shows over and over that she cares about RWBY and is willing to make sacrifices for her, but that's not the only option she chooses in every single instance. I love the route it seems season 8 will be taking, because so far we've only seen Yang agree with RWBY. And yeah, Yang could have been a little gentler on the delivery, but I think she's valid in questioning leadership. RWBY and John aren't perfect. They're bound to make mistakes. And obviously I understand what RWBY's doing, but I appreciate at least that Yang is giving her input. Direction and teams aren't meant to come from one source. I mean, John is more a strategist than a leader, and is never the one to call the shots all the time. And I don't think RWBY is either. She's clearly upset, but I know she respects her sister's desires and input. I just think it's weird that some people are willing to pull the moral gray card when it comes to things like fascism, but not with sibling disagreements, especially when both of their plans, regardless of who is right, are meant to save people. Although if I proposed a plan and season 7/8 Ren immediately sided with me, I'd feel a little bit embarrassed and probably question myself. Although I feel the team split up was a bit weird, with Nora now salty that Ren is staying with Mantle, and with Ren caring about Mantle, and Yang thinking her OP ass is best equipped for this instead of the main mission. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this feels like the writers just wanted the team split up this specific way and ignored the background of why which character would choose which team. I can't complain though, I get to see Yang and the boys. So yeah, I'll agree with people who think Yang's character has been a bit too tied with Blake since season 7, but I will never agree that she's not tied to RWBY enough. They're clearly still sisters, but I can't fault Yang for treating her sister as a teammate first when it comes to things like strategy in the midst of a war. Queen has priorities. Obviously, she'll fight to protect RWBY's life, and RWBY will do the same for Yang, but we shouldn't be pissed that Yang wasn't afraid to step on her sister's feelings when lives were at stake. In fact, I think her willingness to push aside these feelings demonstrates how much Yang respects RWBY as a huntress. She trusts RWBY with the truth, with her own opinion, because she knows RWBY is mature enough to handle a debate, to handle having separate opinions. This whole fight, and I'm using quotes because I've said meaner things to my brother when he gets toothpaste on the sink, is really just proof of how well-rounded RWBY and Yang are as both siblings and characters. Based on the intro, this will be a major role in season 8, and I couldn't be more excited. I'm sure for all the people who asked for more sibling content, this separation and disagreement wasn't their wish, but it is sibling development, isn't it? Also, if I wanted to read too deeply into Yang's character for stuff the writers definitely didn't want to intend, I would argue that the reason Yang is willing to treat RWBY as such an independent now is because of how reliant RWBY must have been in their youth. Remember when Yang said her father shut down after Summer Rose's death? Yang was the emotional support elder daughter at age 4? I think she's completely valid in wanting her own life and freedom now. I don't think prioritizing makes someone a bad person. And while I think Yang will always prioritize RWBY's safety, I don't think she'll always prioritize RWBY's comfort, and that's not a bad thing. Like I said, older siblings have been romanticized in media in an arguably damaging way. The burden these portrayals in media place on real-life older siblings is probably stressful, at the very least. I think relationships like RWBY and Yang's are healthy, and out of all the things that exist in the RWBY universe to criticize, Yang as an older sister probably isn't one of them.